What is up, guys? Welcome back to CageChat MMA. We're here, of course, for the UFC Vegas 34 preview. We just recently hit 100 subscribers, so thank you very much for that. Can we get it to 150 now? Of course, we've got a busy schedule coming up. We've had a week or two off now with the UFC at least, but we are back tonight with what is going to be a middleweight cracker, I believe. Obviously, you've got Kelvin Gastelum versus Jared Cannonier. Two fighters that are looking to get back onto the winning column after both having lost to Robert Whittaker, the number one contender, and Robert Whittaker is going to be supposed to be fighting Israel Adesanya once again for that middleweight title. It's supposed to be happening in November at MSG, but it looks like it's going to get pushed back to 2022 because of the lockdown situation and COVID situation in both Australia and New Zealand, which is fair enough. So tonight it's a big fight for both of those. Of course, the middleweight division is similar to the welterweight division, one that is sort of in limbo at the moment. We know that we've got a quite dominant champion in terms of Israel Adesanya, who's started to clean through those top four, those top five. He's got a win over, Whittaker. He's beaten Marlon Vettori, Paulo Costa, Derek Brunson. He beat before he became champion, of course. So he's looking at who's next now, and obviously, a lot of people are thinking maybe Jared Cannonier was that next in line. A lot of people are thinking, maybe it was time for the killer gorilla to get his shot, but he slipped on that banana peel that is Robert Whittaker. Obviously, he broke his hand or his arm in that fight as well. So it shows, he's on the road to recovery. I guess he's recovered from that arm break, but it's time to get back into the win column because he's someone that could be a problem in this middleweight division. Obviously, a former heavyweight and light heavyweight. The only fighter besides Conor McGregor to have wins in 3 different weight classes. Of course, now he's come down weight classes. McGregor obviously went up, and you would have seen that tweet today when he said the best of luck tweets to the competitors tonight. So yes, it's interesting to see what's going to be happening in this bout, of course. So yes, obviously Kelvin Gastelum, of course, he did take that fight against Robert Whittaker on short notice himself. Of course, he was supposed to be fighting Whittaker, that is, was supposed to be fighting Paulo Costa on the night, but unfortunately Paulo Costa got injured. So obviously this camp has been a perfect camp in the sense that he's had 9-10 weeks to really train for this fight, to prepare for this fight. He's had his calendar marked off for this date for a few weeks now, a couple months even. And he's still some would say the toughest opponent that Israel Adesanya faced, the champion. And I'd be down for that rematch. Now, whether I think Kelvin Gastelum can climb that mountain again, I'm not so sure. And I think Israel Adesanya even has climbed 2 or 3 steps above what he was when they fought back at UFC 236, the interim title. And it just shows how this sport can be so, cruel and fast-paced in terms of how the environment changed. Please remember, back in February 2019, Kelvin Gastelum, on the day of the fight, was getting ready to walk out against Robert Whittaker for that title shot. Of course, obviously, Robert Whittaker suffered a hernia on the morning of the fight, and that fight got pulled, and obviously, Israel Adesanya went on to beat Anderson Silva in that main event, co-main event that got boosted up, of course. And obviously, those two fought for the interim title, and Israel Adesanya got the better on that night. But for Kelvin Gastelum, since that, it's been up and down. Yes, he has taken a couple of fights. He got a very unlucky loss, or a very close loss, you could say, maybe not unlucky. Split decision loss to Darren Till, of course, and obviously he lost that heel hook to Jack Manson, which was more heartbreaking than the previous 2 performances. Of course, the Adesanya fight was a war fight of the year, I believe. Obviously, Darren Till split decision loss. It happens. When you leave it to judges, it can happen. They can sway the other way. Many people thought Kelvin Gastelum won that fight. You move on to the next one, but the Jack Manson one, he came out a bit too aggressive, a bit too fast. And obviously, the Joker, Jack Manson, has got that jiu-jitsu in his back pocket where he can pull out a submission here and there. And Jack Manson also, similar to, Jared Cannonier, was someone who was supposed to be the dark horse of this division. Someone, who you're not putting your money on to win titles, but keeps getting wins here and there and almost becomes inevitable that they're the number one contender. Obviously, since then, Jack Manson lost to Marlon Vettori. Of course, so he slipped down the pecking order as did Kelvin Gastelum since that fight last year in July. Obviously, Gastelum came back and beat Ian Heinisch via unanimous decision. Took that early fight against Whittaker, again lost that via unanimous decision. So he's 4-1 in his last 5, or 1-4, should we say? 1 win, 4 losses in his last 5. But let's not forget, he's got wins over the likes of Jacare Souza and Michael Bisping, who maybe weren't in their prime when Kelvin Gastelum fought him. But you got Michael Bisping, former champion. You got Jacare Souza, definite Hall of Famer. You got Chris Weidman, former middleweight champion, beating him prior to that Michael Bisping fight. You've got Tim Kennedy, Johnny Hendricks. He's got one of the most phenomenal resumes on his career. Since he's been at 170 and 185, he's got absolute killers on it. Nate Marquardt, Tyron Woodley, Jake Ellenberger. The list goes on. Uriah Hall, of course, just fought 2-3 weeks ago now. He's got absolute killers on his record. Vitor Belfort and no contest, of course. So, you're probably looking at him going, and he's faced pretty much everyone and everything when it comes to this sport. He's 17-7 now, and let's have a look at the tape, of course. You got Cannonier coming in at 13-5, 17-7. The height of Gastelum has always been one that's come to question. Is he big enough? Is he tall enough to be a middleweight? A lot of people think he's a welterweight, but of course, even yesterday, he missed the weight by a quarter of a pound, which of course, I don't see too much in a quarter of a pound. It's when you miss 2, 3, 4 pounds. I start to question, the proceedings of the camp, the issues that have caused that weight cut. When it's 0.25, not that he should get away with it easier, but I do see that as less of the crime, less so to speak, than when you miss 2, 3, 4 pounds. Like Nico Montana missed, 2 weeks ago, she missed by 7 pounds, I believe. That is, that's unacceptable. But yes, Kelvin Gastelum, of course, big reach disadvantage, 6 inches he gives away to Jared Cannonier, which is obviously since, one was a former heavyweight, maybe definitely too big for that, too small even for that division, has come down and they're meeting in the middle. And of course, Jared Cannonier has that 2-inch reach advantage in the legs as well. So you're looking at this going, Kelvin Gastelum's probably got the experience. He's had more fights, only by 2 of course, but he's also had more. His fights have been bigger, more scaled, more. He's fought tougher opposition and a higher leveled opposition. So you'd probably say in an experienced opponent, he wins that. But Cannonier, put some power in it and has got some powers in his hands, which is carried down from heavyweight, of course. He's absolutely jacked. He's got a fantastic, engine. Whether he can go 5 rounds, who knows? He did manage to go 5 rounds against, of course, Robert Whittaker in that main event, and that was with a broken hand. Sorry, 3-round fight. It was, of course, on the co-main of 254. So he went to 3 rounds. Can he go those extra distance in the championship rounds tonight? Who knows? But he's someone that's been interesting to watch. Of course, the Anderson Silva win, where he got booed out of Brazil back at UFC 237. That one was one of those wins where he got a big name on the resume, but the way that injury happened, it was I think it was a check or something, of course, because Anderson threw the leg kick and went down. Obviously, not quite to the extent of the break that he suffered against Chris Weidman. But it's one of those ones, especially being in Brazil as well, where the fans are so ferocious and so passionate about their fighters. It almost put a dampener on the defeat that Cannonier had produced. Not quite dissimilar to how Israel Adesanya beat Anderson Silva. That one was a fun fight, and of course how Uriah Hall beat Anderson Silva. This win that Jared Cannonier, rightfully earned, had a different feel about it. Obviously, after that he went on to beat Jack Manson by TKO. Before that, he had defeated David Branch, of course. Obviously, prior to that, he tried at light heavyweight against Dominic Reyes and the light heavyweight champion Jan Blachowicz with 2 unsuccessful attempts there, causing him to move down to middleweight. So he's 3-1 in the middleweight division, having lost to that former champion Robert Whittaker in October last year. So I do think Cannonier has enough to win this fight. I think Kelvin Gastelum might have to bring out the war Gastelum that we saw against Israel Adesanya. The difference is, how does Cannonier deal with the takedowns, the wrestling of Kelvin Gastelum? Of course, you'd expect Jared Cannonier to be the stronger fighter, having fought at those heavier divisions, having faced tougher oppositions and stronger oppositions than Kelvin Gastelum, with respect to Gastelum, of course. So it's one of those ones. What happens when it's up against the cage? Can Kelvin Gastelum mix in those strikes with those takedowns? Of course, he's going to have to find that range, of course, having that 6-inch disadvantage against Cannonier. Cannonier's going to be able to probably be outside the cage a bit more, look for 1s and 2s, look for the body, look for a couple of leg kicks maybe, and look to finish the fight via knockout or TKO, as he did against Jack Manson. Whereas Kelvin Gastelum's going to need to try and maybe draw this fight out, get Cannonier a little bit reckless, maybe a bit overconfident, and then come in, throw 1 or 2 strikes, whether they hit the target or not, then go for that single leg or that double leg, take the fight to the ground and maybe look for a submission there or finish the fight by a ground and pound. In my opinion, I think that's how the fight goes should Gastelum win it. There's a good chance that Gastelum comes out a bit more aggressive, but I think he should come out more controlled. One, because it's not a short notice fight, and two, he's put so much work in his camp, it'd be silly to come out there, and of course there's a limited capacity, about 200-300 I believe in the Apex. Of course there's that smaller octagon. It's a different atmosphere to what the fighters that have been on the pay-per-view have been feeling with the sold out crowds. So maybe how that adrenaline or lack of adrenaline walking into the cage affects both fighters. Of course, Cannonier fought Whittaker in Fight Island, of course, which I don't believe those crowds. It was before crowds got to be brought back into Fight Island, of course, that first fight in January. So both have had that scenario and the experience of fighting in an arena with less competitors than usual. The predictions, I do think Cannonier gets the job done. I think Gastelum comes up a little bit short here. I don't think we go 5 rounds. I think it does go 3 or 4 rounds, and then we get a finish from Cannonier. It'll be interesting to see what happens after that fight. Should he win? Of course, let's have to look quickly at the ranking. Of course, you've got Adesanya champion. Whittaker's more than likely going to be facing him. Should be facing him. Of course, he's earned that right to have another crack at Adesanya and go back through what was once his, of course. Paulo Costa's fighting Marvin Vettori, Brunson's fighting Teal. So there's a lot of movement. Obviously, Kelvin Gastelum, Jared Cannonier tonight are fighting. And should Kelvin Gastelum win, he puts himself up into 3rd in the rankings. So it puts him in a bit of the queue. Whether you rerun that fight against Darren Till, obviously you'd probably imagine whoever wins that fight between Derek Brunson and Darren Till probably fight to win it tonight between Jared Cannonier and Kelvin Gastelum. And what a cracking fight that would be. Obviously, you've got Sean Strickland coming off that win against Uriah Hall, Edmund Shabazian, and I believe this Titan, but he's coming off the back-to-back losses, of course. He might be fighting soon. I'd have to research that. My apologies. But yes, to look at the title run, of course, and who knows, it might not be, whoever wins tonight would probably have to wait another 12 months to get a title shot. So they definitely have to remain active and probably fight once, if not twice more, between now and this time next year. So personally, looking at the division, obviously Adesanya's beaten Whittaker, he's beaten Costa, he's beaten Vettori and Brunson. So Cannonier and Darren Till are the two options there where you're looking at that and going, those are the two remaining options for fresh matchups and potential upsets, you could say, with all due respect to those two, but definitely potential upsets to take Adesanya's throne away from him. Obviously, whoever wins between Vettori and Costa is going to want to run that one back, but neither of them had fantastic displays against Adesanya. Robert Whittaker, of course, former champion. He deserves that shot, and he should get that shot. Hopefully in New Zealand or Australia, it'd be great to see that happen in Oceania rather than in the States, but who knows, maybe it has to happen in Fight Island or in the States, depending on what's going on 6-7 months from now. If Derek Brunson wins, he definitely puts himself back into title contention, but of course, Adesanya beat him at the UFC 230 in quite dominant fashion, that dominant finish in the first round, of course. Sean Strickland's one of those where he puts in great performances, but he never really says the right things. He said he doesn't want to be champion. He said he would be the worst champion ever for the UFC, in terms of the marketing ploy at least. So that makes that matchup tough to make. So you're looking at Darren Till, maybe as a British fan and a fight fan, saying, let's get this job done. You're supposed to, fight for a title a year ago. You lost Robert Whittaker again. Fantastic fighter is Robert Whittaker, so no harm taken in losing that fight. Obviously, he was supposed to fight Vettori, I believe, back in April. That fight didn't take place. So he's had a tough run of it. But Darren Till needs to get that win on September 4th against Derek Brunson. Unfortunately, the fight's not happening in London or in England. It's happening in the States now, which is a bit of a bummer to see, because that card was looking cracking for UK fight fans. Probably the best card we would have seen in the UK in a long time. The debut of Paddy Pimblett, Darren Till, as we mentioned, Martin Can, Leroy Murphy, all these guys fighting on that card. It would have been a cracking event too. But unfortunately, that's going to be happening in the States now at the UFC Apex, of course. So yeah, so you're looking at Darren Till to beat Derek Brunson, and then we work it out from there. Paulo Costa, Marvin Vettori. If either one of those wins, you could see that matchup against Darren Till. But definitely tonight, if Jared Cannonier and Kelvin Gastelum put in fantastic performances and gets a finish, maybe a performance of the night bonus on their record, who knows? We can run it back with Darren Till or we can make a fresh matchup between Jared Cannonier and Darren Till, and see how the middleweight landscape plays out. But again, it's very similar to how the welterweight division and the heavyweight division is, maybe more so the welterweight and less so the heavyweight now, because obviously heavyweight's got an interim champion, so regardless, we know who's going to be fighting for the title next and how that landscape's probably going to play out with John Jones and Stipe Miocic. But here is a tough one to run out, as is the welterweight division. Jared Cannonier, if he gets a win tonight, he's just one win away from that title shot. It's just, can he level up to that point where, he's not slipping on banana peels? And can Kelvin Gastelum get back to where he was when he fought Israel Adesanya at UFC 236? How much has he progressed since then? Because we know how much Adesanya's progressed. But Gastelum definitely, win tonight puts him in a good spot. I'd like to see him get to Victoria Costa. Maybe a Whittaker on full camp, although Whittaker gave them a handy defeat. Kelvin Gastelum definitely stayed on the fight. I think he had Whittaker rocked in that 5th round, if I remember rightly. He was still going forward. He was still pressuring Robert Whittaker. So I would be down to see, 3 or 5 rounds of that again. But we have to make sure that Whittaker and Adesanya fight first in their rematch. So yes, of course, this card on paper isn't the most outstanding card. It's one of those ones where you have a pay-per-view next week and all the stars have been put on that card, especially in the pandemic. We're stacking the pay-per-views to get as much revenue out of the pay-per-views as possible, and that makes sense business-wise. And of course, the pay-per-views this year have been fantastic, probably due to the lack of inconsistency between having fans on the fight nights and having fans on the pay-per-view. They have a bit of a more risen occasion. They're a bit more special this year, the pay-per-views. But tonight, obviously, we've got Clay Guida versus Marco Madsen in the co-main event, a fantastic co-main event. Obviously, 36-20, 56 professional fights for Clay Guida versus 10-0 Marco Madsen. This one is a wrestler up against a good, solid striker, and Clay Guida, obviously, Guida's a legend, a veteran, a Hall of Famer even in this sport. Marco Madsen, the Olympian, coming in at 10-0. He beat Austin Hubbard by unanimous decision, and Danilo Bellardo prior to that, of course, former Cage Warriors alumni, of course, so, a huge respect to him. But this is what, Clay Guida has certainly been one of those fighters where we're looking and hearing and almost expecting that retirement announcement, that retirement fight. But he still keeps coming, still keeps going. Obviously, there's a lot of talk and comparisons between him and Diego Sanchez, and they might both be done. But obviously, Diego Sanchez has moved on from the UFC. But the Carpenter's certainly, still got a foothold in the sport. He beat Michael Johnson by unanimous decision back in February. Prior to that, he was on a 2-fight loss streak. Jim Miller, Bobby Green. He'd beaten BJ Penn prior to that, and obviously lost before that. BJ Penn went to the now lightweight champion Charles Oliveira. So it's been one of those moments where, if Marco Madsen gets a win tonight, he's got a fantastic name on his resume and a fantastic name to get a W next to. It's just what Clay Guida shows up. And maybe do we see Clay Guida for the last time? I doubt it, but at 39 years of age, the clock's certainly ticking on his announcement for retirement, or at least maybe getting cut from the UFC and moving to other organisations, or even bare knuckle boxing seems to be the destination fighters go to these days, or find YouTubers maybe. And we'll talk about Woodley versus Jake Paul next week. The remainder of the card, obviously, you got Chase Sherman versus Parker Porter in heavyweight division. You got Trenton Jones versus Said Kakaramanov. Obviously, Said coming into this on short notice. I think he only got a call Wednesday, Thursday. Missed weight on the first attempt. I'm not quite sure if he made it on the second attempt. But definitely 8-2 against 13-6. Trenton Jones, a fantastic fighter. Got some good knockouts on his record, of course. You've got Alexandre Pantoja versus Brandon Royval. Open up the main card, of course, at 125. Potentially, you got 4th and 7th in the flyweight division. Potentially, one of these two could, put their hand up for a title shot, maybe with a fantastic win tonight. Obviously, there's 2 competitors in terms of Davison Figueiredo and, of course, Askar Askarov. Obviously, Cody Garbrandt's coming into this division now as well. So there's going to be some movement in that division. I would like to see the Figueiredo trilogy. But if Cody Garbrandt gets his victory in this division up against Kai Kara France, of course, Cody Garbrandt will certainly be next in line just because he's a former champion. He brings his name down to that division. But definitely tonight, Brandon Royval, a fantastic fighter, a likeable fighter as well. And obviously, Alexandre Pantoja, number 4 flyweight in the world. And of course, he's got that. He just beat Manel Cape back in February. He lost to Askar Askarov, of course, and he's also got that loss to Davison Figueiredo. So a win tonight for him would certainly put him back into that number one contender sort of area where he could certainly get a title shot or get a Figueiredo maybe, and we see what happens with Askarov and the rest of the flyweight contenders. Before that, obviously, or sorry, after that, you got Dink Finchel versus Austin Hubbard. That's after the fight in the main card. But on the prelims, we've got Luis Saldana versus Austin Lingo, Brian Kelleher versus Domingo Pilate, we've got Bayer Malecki versus Josiane Nunes, William Knight versus Fabio Charant, Rosenthal Roberts versus Ignacio Bahamondes. That's a fight I'm particularly looking forward to because Rosenthal Roberts always brings a good fight, always knows how to get a finish, or maybe on other occasions be finished. He's one of those fighters that, either fighting him, there's a good chance of getting a performance of the night bonus, or a fight of the night bonus at least. And you've got Rahim Archer versus Sasha Palatnikov. Apologies for butchering the pronunciations there, but that's opening up the card. So it's one of those cards that we've seen more recently on paper. Isn't the most compelling card, but definitely it's going to be one, 3 hours, 3-4 hours in 3-4 hours time. Sorry, we're looking back and saying, oh, this was a pretty cracking card. There's some fantastic finishes on this one, and of course it closes out a weekend where we saw Bellator and PFL, of course, compete. Obviously, PFL saw Kayla Harrison win and go on into that PFL championship. So we will recap all of the action this weekend tomorrow, of course, on the recap. Just to see the counterbouts, because there's a couple one here that were looking to be good fights. Obviously, Paulo Costa, Jared Cannonier was supposed to be on this card. Courtney Casey versus Leona Jojoa was on this card. Abdul Razak Al Hassan versus Antonio Braga Neto was on this card. That's been rescheduled. So yes, a couple of names and a couple of fighters there that we could have seen and witnessed on this card, which would have been a fantastic fight. Cannonier versus Paulo Costa would have been a cracking bout. But again, Kelvin Gastelum versus Cannonier is equally an equally astounding fight, and could shape up this middleweight division nicely. It's a big fight for both parties, and it'd be interesting to see tomorrow morning just where we go from the unfolding of this card tonight. But yes, I'm going to leave it there, guys. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. We're on 100 subscribers at the moment. We're looking to get to 150 as soon as possible, so make sure to hit that subscribe button. Go and follow us at CageChat MMA on socials, of course, on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. And I'll see you guys on the next video.